Outside of Condonia City, about 100 miles away, near a tumultuous hill, divine light streaked across the sky as Ares once again set his chariot down. His chest heaving violently, intense anger burned within him. The god of war never imagined that, just after hearing from Zeus about these wizards performing blood sacrifices in the city and abducting the goddess of youth, he would be so humiliated by these vile and contemptible faithless ones. Nightingale's underwear. In truth, although there was no evidence, Ares felt that these wizards were likely not just mocking him personally. They might have somehow heard some distant rumors and rashly concluded that Aphrodite was a goddess with a wanton personality. And the reason the wizards sent such a gift was, in fact, to mock him behind his back, to mock his marriage with Aph, and to envy that he possessed the most beautiful goddess in the world. Despicable scoundrels! You who deserve to be cast into the abyss, come out! I know your little tricks, you just want to anger me, to enrage the great god of war Ares, don't you? I'll tell you, you succeeded. Now, come out and face me. Soon. It won't be long before I imprison you in my divine kingdom and torture you for 10,000 years. Flying quickly, Ares shouted in rage. But just as he passed this hill, the corner of his eye noticed the changes on the ground beneath him. Vaguely, several things originally concealed by a kind of rune array started to emerge. What are those, some kind of giant demon or beings with ancient bloodlines? Focusing his senses, the war god could not feel any powerful life force beneath the earth. Only the combat instincts endowed by his godhood told him that these were not simple enemies. Ridiculous! Come out! Boom! Drawing the bronze sword from his waist, Ares couldn't remember how many swords he had replaced recently. He only remembered Hephaestus warning him that although this wasn't a meticulously crafted divine artifact, he should not casually damage it. Aha! Do I want to destroy it? You should ask why I always encounter beings beyond common understanding. Fortunately, this time his enemies were only a group of spellcasting wizards. Clang! The sword blade fell, embedding itself in a thick layer of metal. But unlike what the war god expected, the power he infused into the sword seemed greatly diminished by this layer of metal. Power that could split mountains and rocks was forcibly blocked, only shattering a gap several feet long. Feeling this familiar power, Ares's expression turned grim. Achilles, waters of the Styx. Correct. This is metal baptized by the waters of the Styx, even if it's only diluted Styx water. Whoosh! A silver light flashed, and an old woman with white hair appeared out of nowhere in the sky not far away. And around the war god, the ground began to quiver, as colossal metal titans, standing over 100 feet tall, slowly emerged. The solid metal turned to liquid, and with just one flowing motion, the damage Ares had caused disappeared into nothingness. Seeing all this, the god of war's face darkened even more, although he could sense that his attacks were not meaningless. Because, although these metal titans were also surrounded by the power of the Styx, they were clearly not comparable to Achilles, who had perfectly absorbed the river's essence. They may possess a certain degree of Vajra unbreakable, but Ares's power could still cut through this metal. Moreover, he could feel that as his power clashed with theirs, the Styx's power on these titans' bodies was gradually weakening. Clearly, if he had divine power right now, these laughable things wouldn't last long at all. Or if he had more than one legendary and demigod-level companion with him, they could easily use sheer numbers to wear down the breath of the Styx, but right now he was alone. His originally angry heart slightly cooled, and Ares frowned. However, seeing this, the white-haired old woman only started to speak with a smile. Honorable Ares, regarding you and the goddess of beauty Aphrodite, I've heard the stories before. So, before we came to blows, I specially sent you a gift. I wonder if you received it? I know that perhaps, in front of you, the revered goddess isn't as free and casual. But with the gift I gave you, maybe late at night you can. Boom! Before she finished speaking, a bronze short spear broke through the air. Sensing the faintly locked space, the white-haired old woman casually drew a line, breaking through this inherent spatial anchor point. She didn't know what to say, clearly possessing demigod-level sacred power, yet unable to interfere with battlefield space jumps. Being a demigod-level godhood practitioner, how could these Olympus gods not even match some godhood practitioners? She almost laughed. Ah, scoundrel, shut your mouth. Boom, boom, boom. Another 3 bronze short spears broke through the air under Ares's fiercely intimidating roar. Marching forward, the war god's eyes were already bloodshot. So, it was you, but what do you know, I am Apha's only husband. We are legitimately married. Under the witness of the mother goddess, and the attestation of the marriage guardian, we became eternal partners. You cannot attack us for this. You shameless wizards, you offer blood sacrifices, summon evil creatures, even plunder deities, and now you still dare defame me. Ah, die for me. Die for me. Die for me. 3 yells in succession, each angrier than the last. At this moment, a strong sense of crisis surged in the white-haired old woman's heart. When a deity's emotions fluctuated to the extreme, their domains would instinctively guide their powers to manifest changes. No mental attack, divine arts? At this moment, the war god's voice was the war roar. No explosive power, secret techniques? The heart beating like a war drum was the battle song. Even the spatial lock that could be easily torn apart became noticeably stronger at this moment. Astonished from the bottom of her heart, the white-haired old woman could only marvel at the infinite potential of these ancient true gods. Yet, potential is just potential, it's ultimately not present ability. Besides, though she had little understanding of the gods' matters, mentioning Aphrodite was mainly because of her believers, but now, it seems the war god reacted a bit too strongly. Wearing a strange expression, decisively retreating, the white-haired old woman flew away from the army's formation while trying to deliver a final blow. Honorable Ares, I was just saying, why overreact like this? I once heard a saying from Athens. Lies are not deadly, but the truth can hurt. Could it be that, unintentionally, I hit upon the truth you're worried about? Whoosh! Bang 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 bang. A bronze light flashed, shattering 5 defensive spells instantly. Taking the time gained, the old woman dodged, narrowly avoiding the bronze short sword that whizzed through the air. Ha ha! Gasping slightly, cold sweat ran down her back. The white-haired old woman once again admitted that the potential of these true gods was indeed infinite. But it didn't matter. She had already achieved her purpose. Looking at the near-mad, charging Ares, the old woman wiped the sweat from her forehead and swiftly led him away from the army. Meanwhile, at the top of Condonia City, the hood pulled back, revealing a calm face. Among many guards on the city wall, with expressions ranging from repulsion to respect, suspicion to indifference, the grand sorceress remained composed. The sunlight shone on her head, slightly reflecting a gleam. Without any concealment, the serene-looking wizard walked leisurely on the city wall with a bald head. Of Silver Moon City's 12 tower masters, excluding those on business trips, immersed in experiments, or rejecting the chief's invitation, the remaining ones had all come to the city to cooperate in the plan to hunt gods. But now, besides those rejecting to manipulate the Titans, attract the war god, and respond to the white-haired old woman, only she remained here. The robe trailed, a smile on her face. No matter how you looked at it, the bald-headed wizard didn't seem much like an experimental wizard, more like a preacher well-read, mild-mannered, and kind-hearted. In fact, the bald-headed wizard asked herself solemnly, though she wasn't a broadly kind person, she didn't consider herself evil either. She had hardly engaged in soul research. She had hardly collaborated with demons. She had hardly delved into evil creatures or demons. In reality, she had hardly done most of what the world deemed wicked. She even helped the elderly and aided homeless orphans. So, no matter how others judged her, she never thought there was anything wrong with her actions. Even the few behaviors unapproved by others were merely differences in personal belief. Just like now, she intended to come. All right? Shaking his head slightly, the old man said helplessly, no matter what you think or plan to do, The future Silver Moon City can no longer accommodate your existence. At least not in our generation. Your colleagues, they are too bold. And their actions have already been noticed by the monarch of Olympus. So, some among you will be exterminated, and the rest will be exiled. Although from my perspective, I don't think all of you are guilty. The vast majority of people in this world do not understand the nuances of this situation. To avoid tainting the Lord's glory on earth, I will not stop her plans. The bald wizard knew who the old man was referring to. She was the third Archbishop of Silver Moon City and a woman with a rather tough personality. Of course, he wasn't particularly surprised by the old man's decision. Even though, as always, he did not agree with the old man's views. Stain. I don't think your lord would care about this so-called stain. In fact, in my opinion, he wouldn't care about the opinions of mortals and the ensuing debate about the right or wrong of this matter. But none of that matters now because I know what you're going to say. You'll tell me that God can be indifferent, but I cannot. Sighing once more, the bald wizard thought for a moment. He took out a scroll and handed it to the old man beside him. What's this? Taking the scroll, the old man asked. This is part of my research. It's not related to souls, only to the human mind and body. Leave it here. Perhaps your holy temple guards will find it of some interest. Without further explanation, the bald wizard took to the air. Since he was no longer welcome here, he might as well find another place. Standing in the sky, he tried to sense the location of Ares and the connections between Ares, the domain, and the millions of troops on the ground. A strange device manifested out of thin air in his hand. It was a hollow metallic sphere woven from fine threads, with a miniature model of a continent in its center. This was a seismograph, a masterpiece created by the grand sorceress who went to fetch the old white-haired woman. The earliest witchcraft originated from the imitation of the heavens, the rules, gods, and nature. This powerful artifact mimicked the power of Sea Emperor Poseidon. Pun intended or not, he was one of the sea gods who reclaimed the southern coastal sea territory from the ancient sea gods, and he fathered numerous demigods. Poseidon was one of the most familiar deities to the White Tower wizards, and among the creatures they created, the number associated with his witchcraft was also the highest. Although numerous does not equal strong, Poseidon's power was not weak. Especially recently, with the Sea Emperor's disappearance and the ocean's unrest, the destructive might associated with him had grown significantly across the mortal realm. Thus, the seismograph naturally appeared here, becoming a tool for the wizards to massacre mortal soldiers and a lethal weapon to stop their advance. Truly tragic. With a gaze as calm as water and without further comment, the bald wizard extended his perception. Much stronger than any grand sorceress, his enhanced perception easily locked onto the armies within a radius of 1,000 miles and the fluctuations of the war domain. As a grand sorceress specializing in the field of the mind, this was his forte, and one of the reasons he replaced the seismograph's inventor here, silently sensing as time slowly passed. Until at a certain moment, the war god's presence seemed to completely exceed a certain distance, and the invisible blessing instantly weakened by more than half. Seeing this, the bald wizard slowly extended his palm and placed it above the seismograph. Unseen, a certain rule seemed to be shaken. The peculiar object, infused with the power of Poseidon, triggered the residual might he left behind, coincidentally. At the same moment, the authority Poseidon once wielded was continuously being invoked by others. The storm in the sky, initiated by the displacement of the heavenly pillar, boosted by the strongest demigod in the world and countless others. The tsunami in the vast ocean was the collective will of several ocean god systems, driving the tide's surge and endlessly venting its anger. And now the earthquake on the mortal continent, spurred by the power of the seismograph, began to truly manifest its might. Earthquake is not its real name. Earthshaker, Sea Emperor Poseidon. Its essence is the vibration of all things, the destruction brought about by vibration. Expressionless, the seismograph slightly trembled under the bald wizard's hand, and the distant earth began a faint hum. At this moment, a resonance targeting the weak began. The earth was its medium, and vibration was the mode of energy transfer. Ultimately, it would erode all life that could not survive this synchronous resonance in the purest physical form. Buzz. Cough, cough. A low cough echoed. The moment the peculiar object activated, the bald wizard's left hand covered his chest. Unseen, a certain force rebounded on him. Though he was the controller of the seismograph, he too was affected by these vibrations. And even more than the millions of humans far away, he suffered a more concentrated and purer shock. Cough, cough. I didn't expect Poseidon's disappearance would cause such an impact, but let's leave it at that. If it's only to this extent, I'm afraid it can't harm my chi. Taking a deep breath, the bald wizard stood up straight. His research had two parts: the pure heart itself and the combination of heart and life. And chi was the name he gave to the latter, also the final gift he gave to the old man. It's about to begin. Thousands of miles away, ahead in the direction Ares had been pursuing. Waiting early here, the true creator of the was prepared to support the white-haired old woman while somewhat anticipating seeing his masterpiece truly manifested in the world. Few knew that despite being its creator, he had never personally used the full might of this law wonder. The reason was that it harmed both the enemy and himself. To enemies, it was a large-scale weapon of mass destruction. To himself, while it no longer had such a wide range of damage, even its insignificant backlash was enough to severely injure the body of a legendary warrior when concentrated on one person. Especially now, its power had grown stronger with Poseidon's disappearance, and naturally, the backlash had also increased. Yet, as a rule-level law wonder, even as its creator, he couldn't block these rule-based attacks. No choice, the wizard's physical strength was hardly strong. Even if they could reasonably enhance it through some means, considering the mutual influence of spirit and body, they dared not overdo it. Thus, from the day the was created, it was destined that only one person could use it. That was a bizarre wizard who possessed perception beyond a legendary wizard and physical resistance above a legendary warrior. The bald man who never knew what he was mumbling about day after day. Whenever he thought of this, the shadow under the black hood felt a bit awkward. Could it be that Guy's theory really had some merit, that the power of the heart indeed represented the soul itself more than spiritual power? Who knows? Such a bizarre logic. Slightly shaking his head, the Grand Sorceress found it difficult to judge. According to that bald guy, war professionals trained their bodies, but within their bodies they could also form life energy, known as blood energy. Thus, spellcasters meditated to enhance their spirit, and there should be corresponding heart energy in the soul, which he called spiritual energy. Furthermore, compared to the external shell, he believed blood energy was closer to life itself. Just as compared to spiritual power, he thought spiritual energy was closer to life itself. It seemed reasonable, but the Grand Sorceress knew the bald guy himself never dared to try condensing the so-called spiritual energy. Because in his theory, the essence of the heart was indifferent to chaos and order, which was an expression of the fundamental power of spirituality. It could exist in a chaotic form or in an orderly form, so that guy felt fear. After all, besides personally trying it, no one knew what would happen when condensing this so-called spiritual energy. Perhaps it could directly reverse his own perception, purely due to the overwhelming heart power. So, to prove his results, the bald guy eventually combined the condensation of spiritual energy with his blood energy, not letting it exist separately in his soul. In this way, a special thing was born, and a unique path for war professionals also took shape. No need for battles, no need to temper the body. This path only required meditating on oneself, making one's heart strong, and the energy combining blood energy and heart power would also grow stronger. The bald wizard believed that war professionals achieved this way might possess unimaginable mental resistance. Even the pollution from same-level evil creatures couldn't erode their steadfast hearts. Chi? Ki. What a strange name. And stranger still, it could actually resist the backlash of the... Muttering to himself at this moment, Ares's figure had appeared within his sight range. The long pursuit had made the war god feel tired again, but the 4 titan golems as huge as mountains were entangling him relentlessly, not giving him a chance to break free. Annoyed and furious, Ares waved the bronze spear in his hand. feeling a stifling frustration of unused force. Ants, go to hell! Boom! As the last short spear was thrown, once again almost hitting the enemy. At this point, the war god no longer wanted to fight. He wanted to return to his army to suppress the enemy overwhelmingly. Gazing down with anger for a moment from the sky, Ares turned to leave. But just at this instant, a sudden tremor came from the depths of the earth. Thud! Huh! What's happening? Face changing slightly, from the earth's rumble, Ares sensed a somewhat familiar force. This seemed like the power of Zeus' brother, the Sea Emperor Poseidon. A bit bewildered, the war god was unsure. Hadn't the divine king already announced his fate? How could his power appear here? But doubt lasted only a moment, for in the next second, with another tremor, under his godhood perception, large segments of Lynx began disappearing as if erased by something. At first, it was a few, then dozens, and subsequently hundreds. Vaguely, although there wasn't a deep impression, Ares remembered that the disappearing Lynx should be some not very strong laborers or servants. Nevertheless, when the third tremor came, he realized what had happened. How dare you! His figure swiftly retreated. Ares tried to head back in the direction he came from. However, at some unknown point, a black-robed figure stood in his path. Not intending to delay for too long, with the cooperation of the Titan Golem, he only intended to hold the other party off for a moment. Halt, Your Highness, war god. Without any respect, the Grand Sorceress spoke lightly. Fate truly has no eyes. For someone like you to become a deity? For some reason, when the plan officially began, a faint sense of crisis had always lingered in his heart. Fortunately, his task wasn't much. Holding back Ares for a while, the rest had nothing to do with him. Meanwhile, several hundred miles outside Condonia City, right at the once busy stall where 9-headed snake meat was sold, in this long deserted border town, sitting on a stone chair casually picked up, Zeus quietly watched the distant battlefield. He saw Ares being lured away, watched the Titan Golem crawl up from the ground. For this enormous alchemical creation, the divine king gave a high evaluation. He thought that perhaps these wizards had some skills. If he conquered the mortal realm, he might have some of them work for him, doing certain things that were inconvenient for deities or godhood practitioners to handle. Further on, the earth trembled, the seismograph drawing upon Poseidon's scattered divine authority. Frowning, he stared at the shaken laws, thought for a moment, and finally relaxed again. Although he wasn't very clear on its principles, he could roughly see the function of this thing from the perspective of a divine king. A very ingenious concept, but if Poseidon hadn't created so many strange oceanic creatures, there wouldn't be today's seismograph. Wizards, truly the elite among mortals. Speaking in a low voice, Zeus quietly watched Ares' arriving troops dye the plains with blood under the earth's tremors. It was not an empty metaphor, but an actual description. Because the invisible tremor rose from the earth, but eventually caused the bodies of mortals to resonate with it. From the most fragile brain to the 5 organs, blood mixed with internal organs flowed out from the 7 apertures, then when the internal pressure reached a certain tipping point. With a boom sound, the armored soldiers simply exploded into a blood rain, dyeing the ground beneath red. There was no intention to stop it. In fact, Zeus never expected these armies to achieve anything. Even if they fought and took this Condonia City, so what? There would still be a second, a third, even Silver Moon City. Facing the mystery lock set up by the goddess of the magic net herself, if he did not use divine-level strength, even Zeus himself did not know how to break through it. In the war between deities, mortals are merely accompaniments. They can showcase their abilities in the process, but they can never decide the true outcome. Ares, as your father, as your monarch, I have already given you a chance. But unfortunately, you still couldn't grasp it. His expression was calm. If he wanted, Zeus could have secretly warned Ares before he was lured away. But he did not. Because up to this point, Ares' position in the mortal realm was already lost. All that was left was for him to stand the last guard, and explode his power in fear, Being manipulated, it was better to be guided by him than by others. Thousands of miles away, surrounded by four metallic mountains. His eyes were bloodshot, his chest heaving violently. At this point, no matter how much he used his muscles to think, Ares could tell he had been tricked once again. Of course, this wasn't the first time it happened to the war god. He still remembered the first time he was tricked by humans. Ares was furious for an entire year. But when it happened the second, third, fourth time, he gradually became less angry, but this time was different. Because this time he carried a death order from the divine king. Succeed or go die. Although deities do not die, Ares felt no difference between that and death. Leaving the mortal realm, leaving his servants, leaving Aphrodite, being cast alone into the abyss. He wondered if at that time, Aph would think of him every day. Ah! He roared towards the sky, his fingers embedding into the Titan golem's shell like divine iron. Fueled by intense emotion, he lifted the mountain-like golem and hurled it forcefully at another golem. Crash! Like a meteor striking the earth. An instant's impact sent countless dust clouds sweeping in all directions. But bathing in the dust, Ares desperately found that just like every time before, the Titan golem had not suffered any fatal damage. Even though during this time, the power of the Styx River flowing between the metals had depleted by over 30%, and the defense had accordingly decreased, it was still not something he could break through in a short time. Yet, during the time he was stalled, he had no idea how many of his army had died or been injured. Ares certainly didn't care about mortal casualties, but he understood that these human lives now equated to his strength, and his strength equated to the possibility of completing Zeus's task. Until today, he always thought that the mystery lock of Silver Moon City was his only obstacle. He even felt a faint sense of inspiration after hearing about the wizard's citywide blood sacrifice. If he absolutely couldn't break the mystery lock with his own strength, he could try other methods. After all, he had wizards to take the blame for him. But now, it all seemed to be slipping away from him. He couldn't even pass the first stage, let alone the cities beyond. No, I still have a chance. In the billowing dust, Ares reached into his chest. The divine artifact, the Arrow of Thunder, and it was even more powerful than before. Though the war god didn't understand why a postnatal crafted divine artifact would give him such a palpable sense of power, it was a fact. In the past, when attacking Achilles, the Arrow of Thunder gave Ares a sense of sharpness and dread. But now it made the war god feel unattainable. As if Zeus had not forged it with a part of his own godhood, but with his entire being. There was even a vague sense that Ares had another feeling. The current thunderbolt was no longer complete, because it had found its fated other half, another divine artifact capable of shining brilliantly with it. Although this premonition seemed even more absurd than the previous one, Ares vouched with his war god's intuition for weapons that it might just be true. Of course, whether it was true or false had nothing to do with him now. Ha! Huff! Muscles bulged, and Ares panted heavily, his heart struggling. Should he make a move? If he did, could he still maintain his powerful divine strength? But if he didn't, was what Zeus said earlier just empty words or his final ultimatum? His thoughts were chaotic, and the dust around him gradually settled. In the midst of it, for towering metal titans closed in on him once again, fearless of death. At the same time, as if afraid he would flee, a voice echoed from afar. Prince Ares, are you going to flee now? The war god with 100 defeats truly lives up to his name. The black-robed grand sorceress, looking at Ares standing on the earth, despite knowing that a sheathed sword is a shame, still spoke the words she had long wanted to say. Born a deity, how did you end up like this? But never mind, come. I'll teach you a trick. In 1,000 years, when your child asks you about this story, you can say to them, Child, though you may not have my bloodline, and I don't know who your father is, none of that matters. Because under my guidance, though you won't achieve victory, as long as you learn the lessons I taught you, you will avoid all defeats in this world. Zhang! In the sky, this time, the black-robed sorceress received no response. Between heaven and earth, there was silence. Moments later, on the dusty earth, she saw only a sudden rise of purple thunderbolt. The fourth layer of the spirit realm in the all-spirit realm. April hung in the sky with countless souls around. The bicolored great sea cycled endlessly. With every breath, millions of souls flowed through, and countless soul bodies merged back into it. Three goddesses in charge of spring, summer, and autumn judged the merits of all spirits day and night, determining the start of their next life. Yet for thousands of years, the entire all-spirit realm seemed like it had been independent from the spirit realm system, because since long ago in the Bronze Age it had severed its connections with other layers. Outsiders could not enter, and those within would not leave. So, silently guarding here, Eros gently flapped her petite wings and stifled a yawn. She and Volos had a deal that if needed, they would take turns guarding here while the other went to play. As for deciding who stays and who goes, they had their own method. They would weaken their power, creating fake golden arrow and lead arrow, and then bet with a couple or enemies. They would wager on how many arrows were needed to drive a loving couple apart or make mortal enemies fall into love. The winner leaves, the loser stays. And clearly, today Eros was the loser. Yawn. Covering her mouth, Eros shook her head, trying to keep herself awake. Though their behavior seemed excessive, as if mortals' desires were mere toys in their hands, the twins didn't feel that way. To them, the behavior itself was not inherently good or evil. They were simply betting, and not deriving any joy from manipulating love and hatred. Just as humans wouldn't feel guilty or delighted over eating or walking, they wouldn't experience any emotional changes over such routine actions. Time silently flowed, spirit moons waxing and waning. At some point, beside the already asleep Eros, a pale lavender moon shadow flickered. The hem of a gorgeous dress trailed the ground, and Liana stepped onto the land of the all-spirit realm. She furrowed her brows lightly, then relaxed. Without waking the dreaming Eros, Liana exchanged a glance with the white dragon wandering in the dream. Not until Ishara averted her gaze guiltily did Liana take a step forward, appearing directly at the center of the all-spirit realm. Princess Liana, why are you here? Instinctively on guard, seeing who it was, the goddess of autumn Erinis gave a slight bow and sent a message to her sisters that it was not an enemy. I need your help. Speaking softly, Liana's gaze swept over Erinis and the two goddesses who had rushed over. The latter were slightly taken aback, exchanging glances. Eventually, the eldest sister among them, Eunomia, the goddess of spring and rebirth, nodded solemnly. It is our honor, Your Highness. Please instruct us. What do you need us to do? It's very simple. Nodding slightly, Liana's pale fingers traced a seam in the void. Through the rift in space, Eunomia could vaguely see the scene behind it. Towering mountains, a majestic view piercing the clouds, an unattainable sanctuary for mortals. To the surprise of the sisters, it was not the place recently marred by human casualties, not the only faith's kingdom of the mortal realm, but instead an entirely opposite locale. It was the home of the gods, the domain of the divine king, Olympus. It's there, or more accurately, the bedchamber of heavenly Empress Hera. Speaking softly, Liana didn't explain the reason. The three goddesses exchanged glances and then nodded simultaneously. Attacking there was not important. Since Liana was the spirit realm's guardian appointed by the Master's will before departing, they would act according to her request. Attacking the divine king's stronghold sounded terrifying. But so what? No matter how powerful Zeus was, he couldn't penetrate the spirit realm. Determined, in the next moment, under the collective will of the three goddesses, the well of reincarnation emitted a faint glow. This ancient artifact, which had never truly faced an enemy since its creation, seemed to awaken from its slumber, gathering the essence of cycle. Looking at this scene with a solemn face, Liana raised her hand to empower the Genesis artifact with the authority of the spirit realm she could command. If it were before, when Hemenu had not yet been destroyed, there would have been no extra power in the spirit realm for her to command. If she had to bear it herself with her current ability, Liana could not mobilize great divine power outside the spirit realm. But the well of reincarnation was different. It was a divine artifact. Liana didn't need to harness great divine power. She merely provided the Genesis artifact with continuous support, and it would naturally reveal supreme divine power. The gaze shifted, looking again at the scenery across the fragmented space. Staring at the palace belonging to the heavenly empress, Liana finally instructed, "Remember, you don't need to deal with Hera. You just need to break open that palace. As for the rest, leave it to me." In a calm voice, at that moment, Liana recalled the prayers of mortal believers. Well, not a bad saying. Though it was false, if it was for the sake of the Master's glory, she would assume it to be true. Smiling faintly, though knowing Lane wouldn't care about his image in mortal eyes, Liana still didn't want the crimes of those wizards to tarnish him. Luckily, those believers were quite clever, she thought to herself. Mortal methods, are they? Not minding the other's rudeness, Zeus never cared about the offense of ants, unless it truly harmed his interests. For example, the image in the eyes of other gods, or the status in the hearts of believers. So, since it's just him and this ancient god's godhood practitioner here, the Divine King didn't mind using her words to check for any shortcomings. Recalling slightly, Zeus' gaze swept over this market. When he saw some broken mirrors and reflective window frames, a flash of realization appeared in his eyes. So that's how it is. Although this is a market belonging to the nations of the continent, Silver Moon City has never been careless about these places close to the borders of both sides. And in these aspects, those wizards have done quite a good job. Just some spells to confuse the mind, and some material rules based on non-transcendent powers, their prearranged spies could see the general activity here from tens to hundreds of miles away. Once there is a large gathering or departure of people, they can issue a warning in advance. And today it was clearly the latter. Everyone here was gone, leaving only him alone, and Zeus hadn't concealed his appearance. Therefore, the shallow believers who linger on the border, smuggling and committing crimes, did not recognize or imagine that this was the Divine King of Olympus. But as their enemy, Silver Moon City discovered his presence and ultimately came directly to him. A good warning, an efficient mechanism. He earnestly praised. Zeus didn't hide his admiration. If the gods under my command could have the same execution power as those wizards, even if they acted more wantonly, I would feel genuinely gratified. Unfortunately, they do not have that capability. And you have also gone astray. With a slight sigh, Zeus looked at the old woman in front of him. He knew, as the Divine King of Olympus, the spirit realm had not at least sent an angel to communicate with him. This was undoubtedly a kind of disrespect, even contempt. But the Divine King was not angry because he liked this kind of disrespect. The more such offenses were made, the more they violated the prevailing concepts of all spirits, the more powerful assistance his power would receive when he finally decided to act. So, the godhood practitioner of ancient gods. As the ruler of Olympus, Chaos, the legitimate king of heaven, earth, and sea, I had no intention of offending the authority of the primordial gods. As their sanctuary in the mortal realm, I should protect it like Delphi once did, allowing no one to desecrate its glory. However, there are always exceptions to everything. Just as the revered Earth Mother Goddess lost her sanity and tried to overthrow the mount of the gods supporting the heaven and earth. Not long ago, I discovered a taboo from Silver Moon City. The gods were indignant at this. Even if the ancient celestial gods and earth gods awakened from their slumber, they could absolutely not tolerate such a great crime. But I did not easily believe their words, because as the Divine King, justice is my rule. So I came here today to seek an answer from the ancient gods. Speaking calmly, with Zeus's voice, beams of light flickered beside him, as if to corroborate what he said. And at the end of the light and shadow, the images split in two. One was the father of stars, withered and looking like a corpse. And the other was a ruin littered with corpses and headless divine corpses wandering around. Since the primordial gods are unwilling to see me, let you answer my question. The wizards of Silver Moon City desecrated the dignity of the gods, treating deities of the Titan era as livestock, and sacrificed my daughter to evil spirits beyond the world. Is this true or false? If it is false, please tell me the truth. I will personally punish those who slander the ancient gods. And if it is true—" His voice paused slightly, and the divine king said indifferently, "Then I will still punish my own offspring. Punish Ares for using troops without authorization and stealing my divine artifact. But at the same time, I have no choice but to place Silver Moon City under the watch of the divine court, just as I once faced the crazed Mother Earth, to prevent similar desecration from happening again. Logical and reasonable without any aggressive stance." Zeus was convinced that, at this moment, he was portraying himself as a saint standing on the moral high ground, the most qualified king in the hearts of all beings of chaos, and quietly waiting for a response, just as he had said earlier. For the divine king, he didn't necessarily have to destroy Silver Moon City, as long as it accepted his management or monitoring. After all, the strength of sovereignty had never been about destruction, but the aggregation of obedience. "So, ruler of Olympus, have you finished your accusations?" The calm words were unexpected by Zeus. Facing the questioning of the divine king, an old woman, a fanatic believer, didn't seem angry. She merely invoked the divine power within her, creating an illusion beside her that seemed indistinguishable from the image next to Zeus. "If you are done, then listen to mine." A cold laugh, though it was a pity she couldn't destroy these fake gods. The old woman knew she didn't have that power. Fortunately, for once, that old kind person was finally smart, worthy of his position. "As a believer of the Lord, I also want to ask you, ruler of Olympus, why did you indulge your queen in colluding with the enemies of all living beings on earth? Even though she ultimately reaped what she sowed, causing her own daughter to be forced to leave the mortal realm." The illusion beside her flickered and finally settled on an image from many years ago. It was a cold stone platform, an improvised ceremonial hall, and a very familiar statue. "This is—" Brow furrowed slightly. Looking at this scene, Zeus was momentarily at a loss. But the next moment, as if he remembered something, the divine king's face immediately turned grim. "This is a sacrifice." On an unnamed mountain, Clotho had somehow secretly picked up the murder weapon that had rolled to the ground. With a critical attitude, the noble goddess of fate decided to use this hollow metal rod. By utilizing its internal structure, objects thousands of miles away seemed close at hand, and it was hard for anyone to notice. After all, she was still a deity of fate. As long as she didn't get too close, not even the divine king could discover her. A live sacrifice. When did this happen? Why don't I have any memory? Is this the childhood of that king of Athens? Such an important figure, yet nearly sacrificed as an offering. How could fate not have the slightest reaction? It's the outer god. A continuous series of exclamations, as if she had seen something she shouldn't have while peering into fate. Fortunately, as a deputy of fate, Clotho's safety in some aspects was extraordinarily high. Seeing traces of the blood mother tree alone had almost blasted Hera's eyes to powder, while she only had a brief cry. Evidently, since she didn't intend to do anything about the mother tree, the other party couldn't do anything to her either, especially since it was just an intention descending in the past. So, pretending to rub her head, Clotho couldn't hold back her curiosity. "That, Mr. Demon King who wants to save the world, is that big tree also your enemy?" "It's at least not a friend." After a moment of thought, Lane replied, "I see. So do you know what this image is about?" Not proficient in lip reading, nor particularly inclined to look into the fate of the divine king. Sensing a vague danger in peering into Zeus's fate, especially after his avatar had ventured into the abyss. So faced with something unknown, the goddess of fate simply asked, "It's not a big deal actually, to be honest. Do you remember I told you before? Athens is also involved in this war, though not in a direct combat role." Replying offhandedly, Lane continued to watch the distant drama unfold. 3 wizards were killed on the spot, 2 definitely dead, the last uncertain, as it wasn't his real body here. In essence, this story had taught people one thing, which was to never be the one attracting the most hatred, because until the last moment you never know what would happen if you corner someone. This is Athens' weapon, the former incident where the current king of Athens, Andrea, was almost sacrificed by the resurrection sect, a group truly worshipping Hera, to that evil ancestor, the Blood Mother Tree. Obviously, just like the witchcraft of Silver Moon City wasn't just starting to research deities today, Hera wasn't just recently beginning to collude with the outer gods. Adding the fact that the wizards chose the goddess of youth, Hebe, as their target, and the deity they previously imprisoned was the only Titan god banished into the abyss by Zeus, Crius' son, the god of the stars, Astraeus. Originally colluding with the Mother Tree, Hera in the end faced backlash when trying to spy on the battlefield on the day Goddess of Youth got captured. A logical story emerged. What story? Deeply engrossed, Clotho instinctively asked. Most likely, even during the Typhon calamity, Hera had secretly contacted the former Grand Sorceress of the White Tower, listed as wanted by Silver Moon City. The sorcerers imprisoned the remnants of the Titans for Hera, letting Crius' son suffer the same punishment as his father. Meanwhile, Hera used Typhon's power at the same time to contact the Blood Mother Tree. According to research, the Resurrection sect seemed to have originated around that period, and its essential doctrine was derived from Hera bathing in the fountain, rejuvenating. Ultimately, sorcerers, Hera, and the Mother Tree colluded together. The former continually carried out some anti-human activities, while the latter took the blame, leaving only the heavenly Empress shining brightly. This lasted for thousands of years, until the Grand Sorceress wanted to go further, to obtain eternal life. Unable to get the Fountain of Youth from the Empress, he simply thought, if you don't give, I'll take it myself. So the outcome became apparent. The Empress was backstabbed by the sorcerer. The outer god only cared about interests, ignoring any previous cooperation. The Goddess of Youth became the sacrificial victim, bearing the price along with her millions of believers for her inherently sinful mother goddess. And when Silver Moon City's church divine warriors finally discovered everything, they descended to end this disaster of evil creatures bursting within the kingdoms of the continent, showcasing the big-picture-mindedness of the ancient gods' believers. The only slight imperfection was their failure to rescue the Goddess of Youth from the clutches of evil, although Olympus had shown no real reaction from start to finish, nor had any god come to eliminate the evils around Nauplion. Here Lane paused. One had to acknowledge the imagination of those believers, which he appreciated. So that's the whole story. Isn't it quite reasonable? If not for the initial human sacrifice, the following reasoning might have seemed disconnected. But with the new king of Athens, Andrea's experience, everything seems less unbelievable. Amazing! Slow to react initially, Clotho couldn't help but praise the cunning of Hera's conspiracy and the deadly reversal by the sorcerers. But as she listened to Lane's latter part, she belatedly realized something. No, this is fake, right? Actually, none of this happened. Well, strictly speaking, all these events did occur, but how to interpret them is subjective. Speaking slowly, Lane asked in a meaningful tone. On a different note, Athens certainly didn't invite Hera to kidnap their princess, nor did they ask her to perform the live sacrifice. Olympus, king of mountains, nearly 10,000 years ago, before the last epic had ended. To escape the conflict between the Titans and the new gods, and also weary of the battles among divine beings, the ancient mountain god, Aria, offered his ancient divine body, plunging himself into eternal sleep, transforming into the mountains piercing through the 9 layers of clouds. From that day on, 2 generations of divine kings, one in the east, one in the west, stood at the peaks of separate mountains on the Mount of the Gods gazing at each other. Upon the earth, deities from both sides fought fiercely, shedding blood. The mountains and rivers were torn apart. Living beings fell like wheat. But in contrast, Olympus remained unharmed. As if Aria's longing was fulfilled, he finally avoided the bloodshed among these deities, until the arrival of this epic. Gaia, Typhon, Blood Sun, Proud Sun, one after another, these existences shook its mountain body. Even the palaces on the Mount of the Gods had to be rebuilt several times. Aria ultimately couldn't escape these, even though he was in eternal slumber with Olympus, king of mountains. nearly 10,000 years ago, before the last epoch had ended. To escape the conflict between the Titans and the new gods, and also weary of the battles among divine beings, the ancient mountain god, Area, offered his ancient divine body, plunging himself into eternal sleep, transforming into the mountains piercing through the 9 layers of clouds. From that day on, 2 generations of divine kings, one in the east, one in the west, stood at the peaks of separate mountains on the Mount of the Gods gazing at each other. Upon the earth, deities from both sides fought fiercely, shedding blood. The mountains and rivers were torn apart, living beings fell like wheat. But in contrast, Olympus remained unharmed. As if Area's longing was fulfilled, he finally avoided the bloodshed among these deities, until the arrival of this epoch. Gaia, Typhon, Blood Sun, Proud Sun, one after another, these existences shook its mountain body. Even the palaces on the Mount of the Gods had to be rebuilt several times. Area ultimately couldn't escape these, even though he was in eternal slumber. Fortunately, in his unique ancient god's dream, having relinquished everything, the divine being did not suffer any pain. On the contrary, he lived quite comfortably in his dream. There, he was the center of the world, the origin of all things, eternally enjoying stability and tranquility, also using his existence to stabilize thousands of ever-unfolding dreams. It was for this reason that the white dragon, through Eros's dream, secretly observed the conversations in the land of reincarnation. Liana naturally knew about this, but she didn't plan to destroy Olympus after all. After all, though this mountain is Zeus's stronghold, he might be the one most eager for the spirit realm to bring it down. And without this eastern heavenly pillar, Atlas is destined to fail in his task of bearing the sky. Ultimately, this responsibility will be imposed on the spirit realm, and the divine king can use this as an opportunity to summon greater power, which he would use against the spirit realm in the future. But you won't get your way. Perhaps this Mount of the Gods will eventually collapse, but it won't collapse by my hands. And today, I only need to fulfill my duties. With a whisper in her heart, Liana took a step forward. Her figure had already arrived in the mortal realm. Surging divine power surrounded her. Yet the laws of order could not prevail over this true god exercising authority. At the end of her sight, the Mount of the Gods loomed from afar. And as she openly announced her arrival, it seemed the deities on Olympus also noticed her presence. But Liana didn't care, because today, the only one who could be her opponent was the divine king's avatar left here. A sneak attack? No, it wouldn't be, and it had no meaning. Because the reason she personally intervened was not to destroy a heavenly queen's palace or to support mortal believers in any way. From ancient times to now, only those who offer faith to the Master have angels to serve their thoughts, not mortals. A palace of Heras, entrusted to the trio governing spring, summer, and autumn, would suffice. As for the rest, it would all be resolved by her. Princess Liana? A flame shot out from the Mount of the Gods. It stopped not far from the shadow of the nether moon, as Hestia looked with surprise at this rare visitor. The Lord of the Spirit Realm's most trusted lieutenant. Was she here for matters regarding Ares? Unaware that Zeus was also there at the moment, the goddess of Huthfire offered a gentle smile. In fact, she had long wanted to meet Liana. Since Achilles stormed the Mount of the Gods, Hestia felt that the development of a series of events was somewhat abnormal. And to understand the reason behind this, directly conversing with a deity from the spirit realm was the simplest way. But the gods of the spirit realm were reclusive, and she hadn't had the opportunity to converse with them before. Stepping forward, the goddess of Huthfire wanted to say something. However, at that moment, a hand rested on her shoulder. "Who, Zeus?" "It's me." He spoke calmly as the avatar of the divine king emerged from behind her. "My respected sister, leave the welcoming of the goddess of the nether moon to me. What do you think?" "No need," she said lightly, as the shadow of the nether moon behind Liana seemed to grow increasingly real. "There's no need for a false welcome today. I came for one reason only." "For what? For something my queen has never done?" His expression remained calm, the same on earth, The same under the sovereign order. No synchronization difference existed between the Divine King's body and his avatar. So whatever happened there, he naturally was aware of it. Yes, Zeus admitted, the affairs with Hera were hard to clarify. After all, how many deities on Olympus haven't done something secretly? But he was sure that Hera had absolutely no connection with those wizards. Princess Liana, I've heard that the ancient Titan's god, the righteous and lawful Themis, has a deep relationship with the spirit realm. Surely you also believe in her justice. If you came for this reason, why not let her judge it? I believe the goddess of law will make the fairest judge. There's no need. Interrupted again, Liana's gaze pierced through Zeus's avatar, looking towards that majestic mountain of the gods. From a mortal's perspective, even from the perspectives of most deities, they could only see that one mountain. Only a very few could see the hidden interface, as well as countless faiths and souls. The king of Olympus. The affairs of mortals should naturally be handled by mortals themselves. If they do well, they should be rewarded. If they do poorly, they should be punished. As for me, I only handle matters of the deities. Hera's affairs have nothing to do with me. But for the thievery you have maintained for 1,000 years, it is time to pay the price. Hera wasn't on the Mount of the Gods at all. She had long left due to her daughter's disappearance. So Liana's true target was never an empty temple, but Asgard. Since the Divine King's hostility towards the spirit realm was obvious, a war was destined to unfold in the future. Then why should she stand by and watch them steal, allowing millions of souls to become the source of divine power for the Olympian pantheon? You! Crack. Without giving Zeus's avatar time to react, as the other's astonishment froze on his face, behind Liana, a shadow of an ancient well with two alternating colors reflected in the sky of chaos. The three fates exerted all their power, but what truly allowed the well of reincarnation to reveal its strength was the power given by Lane to the goddess of the nether moon. Only with great divine power could the complete strength of the Genesis artifact be truly unleashed. However, in the past of chaos, there was never a complete Genesis artifact that truly displayed its might on the earth. The white symbolizes life, the black symbolizes death. In this moment, before words could be said, the Divine King's avatar exerted all his power to resist the pouring two-colored torrent. How dare you? These are the faithful of Olympus. Boom! The light purple dress fluttered. Liana remained indifferent to the Divine King's avatar's anger. At this moment in Olympus, it was as if the sky had opened a crack. Like the heavenly river pouring down, the water of the well of reincarnation rolled in. Even though Zeus's avatar mobilized the interface power of Asgard, even though all the gods on the Mount of the Gods did their utmost to resist, yet in the rotation symbolizing the cycle, countless souls still returned to the embrace of reincarnation, back to the divine kingdom of their creator. Goddess of the nether moon. With a difficult expression, Zeus never expected that the target would be Asgard. Watching those lost souls, though Zeus did not require faith, he still understood what this meant. In the past, he and the gods' churches always told mortals, do not fear death, because after death you will gain eternal life in the realm of the deity you have faith in. But if he couldn't stop the loss of the faith souls today, the god-human contract that lasted for thousands of years would end here. Though this wouldn't cause severe damage to Zeus himself, from the perspective of sovereign authority, the loss of other gods would be his lost power. No, I still have my main body. Suddenly turning head, he gazed southeast of the earth. Though the well of reincarnation and the power of the spirit realm naturally attracted souls, the existence of the Divine King's avatar and Asgard was not without meaning either. Without enough time, the spirit realm could not take away all the souls, and his main body was about to arrive. A subtle change in expression, a hint of confusion flashed in Zeus's avatar's eyes. Where is my main body? Where did he go? Within the scope of Sovereign's order, synchrony between avatar and main body should not be a problem. So if he could no longer sense the main body's location, was he still in the mortal realm? Letting out a surprise, Erebus, who had been silently watching the changes in the mortal realm since Ares moved east, expecting Lane's reaction, also found it startling. Yeah, where did such a large Zeus go? Hadn't he just displayed power, forcibly tearing space, attempting to return directly to the Mount of the Gods? Where did he run off to? Silent without words, equally somewhat surprised. Standing outside the mountain of Olympus in the sky, Liana also couldn't figure out why Zeus hadn't appeared here. The goddess of autumn Erinyes had already successfully destroyed Hera's temple, and even meanwhile, certain other temples that could sense evil power were also exposed to the sunlight by the three goddesses after they destroyed the cover. Just what was confusing was that Zeus, who was expected to return long ago, was still absent, and it was unclear what had happened, until many of Asgard's souls were captured by the Well of Reincarnation. With a slight change in expression, Liana finally sensed a force forcibly tearing through space. Evidently, Zeus had finally arrived. However, compared to the beginning, he was still too late. Click. With a beckon of the hand, a brass-colored book fell into Liana's hands amidst the void. In direct confrontation, she wasn't Zeus's match, that was beyond question. But since she dared to come, she had naturally prepared. The Codex of Creation, the highest of law and order. It was once used by Lane to punish the ancient sun god who violated the solar operating rules. And today, Liana originally intended to use it to confront the Divine King, who forcibly detained the spirit realm souls. Using order against order, using the order of all spirit cycle to confront the rule of rejecting external forces in the present world. Everything was thought through, but what Liana hadn't expected was that Zeus would arrive late. The chains on the brass book naturally unraveled with a clinking sound, revealing the ancient artifact before the goddess of the nether moon. The spirit realm is the origin of the world's souls. Reincarnation is the transit of all souls. Spirituality has its regulations. The birth and death of all spirits have their order. Gently pressing her palm on the pages of the Codex of Creation, Liana presented her final judgment. The violator is guilty. The guilty must be punished. Buzz. Invisibly, as yet another Genesis artifact revealed its might. The power of the spirit realm grew more active and strong here. What truly restricted Liana from exerting the power of the spirit realm was never how much she had, but how much she could use. And with the Codex of Creation's support, using order as a fulcrum, the power she could manifest in the mortal realm instantly increased by more than several folds. Simultaneously, on an unnamed hill thousands of miles from Canonia City. With a somewhat curious expression, but clearly feeling that the backlash of fate on her was slightly lessened. Playing with the beautiful mirror Lane had just obtained through a ritual, Clotho was in a very good mood. Amazing! So this really can repair the damage of fate. Of course, there's an old saying among mortals. First calm the internal before pacifying the external. As a fate goddess, just thinking about finding the source of disruption in fate, what use does that have? Even if you find it and eliminate it, if it no longer interferes with fate, will fate return to the right track? No. Shaking her head slightly, Clotho recalled what Atropos had said. Sister told me that even God King Zeus couldn't accept his fate, just like during the Typhon chaos. He shouldn't have gambled his death either. Although deities are undying, playing with fate doesn't have good results. But at least he is the God King, so we should still stand by him. That's not right. Looking at the fate goddess who had just made a great contribution, Lane smiled and questioned. Think about it, since Zeus is the God King, shouldn't he set a good example for the gods? It seems so. This chapter is updated by Novelfer.nt. After pondering for a moment, Clotho found no problem with that. Then consider again, if you were to solve a complex and long-standing problem, shouldn't you start from the easy parts, addressing the solvable issues first? That seems about right as well. Nodding once again, Clotho agreed. Then ask yourself, compared to the mastermind who stirred up the fate of the whole world, is a God King who must adhere to the order of the present world easier or harder to deal with? The Spleer mirror is very powerful. As a high-grade artifact in the domain of space, its might is enough to toy with the majority of true gods. But its might is not that strong. At least when faced with great divine power, Anything that has not also touched that realm is merely icing on the cake and cannot play a decisive role. It can even be said that even if another great divine power wields a high-grade artifact, unless there is a significant gap in strength between the two, it is also difficult to easily restrict each other's actions in their home turf. Even Hypnos, originally in mythology capable of putting anyone to sleep, needed Hera's allure and Aphrodite's girdle's support to barely ambush an unsuspecting Zeus. Thus, Lane never planned to act personally, nor intended for an avatar with less strength than the Divine King to take action. Only the Fates, with their ties to Zeus, with their unique status, with their special powers, could make the Divine King in the mortal world unable to escape their influence. Ultimately, an unexpected event occurred that no spectators foresaw. His own stronghold was under attack, yet Zeus was nowhere to be seen. So when the void was torn by violent power, vast energy filling the world, the Divine King's mood was indescribable. He never imagined that just as he attempted to take a shortcut back to the Mount of the Gods, a burdensome memory made him distracted for a moment. And in that moment of misstep, an omnipresent space vortex happened to erupt, and without knowing where it took him. Realizing something was wrong, Zeus was greatly enraged, but he could not waste more time here. Thus he utilized his connection to Asgard to once more tear through space. This time, however, he seemed to be too close to one of the outer world's forbidden zones, the Niflheim filled with eternal mist in the realms of time and space. Thus, the power of the evil creatures bound by the fruit of one day seemed to sense the primal source, causing a slight fluctuation, forcing Zeus to swiftly suppress it. Finally, the fluctuations subsided. The strength of the fruit of one day was indeed very solid, but unfortunately, Zeus was once again lost in the chaotic void. Accident after accident, yet it seemed like stepping on the destined script. No one did anything to him. It was just that the correct things happened at the right time and place, and everything came together smoothly. Face grim to the extreme, he finally emerged from the torn space. No words, no harsh declarations. Zeus knew that by this point, Liana could not possibly back down. And although the Lord of the Spirit Realm had yet to reveal himself, the power of the Spirit Realm was unabashedly pouring into those two extremely powerful artifacts. So with a beckoning motion, the thunderbolt arrow stolen by Ares appeared in his left hand. In his right hand, a divine hammer, as if condensed from infinite light, was grasped firmly. He swung his arm down, and the hammer's head collided with the tail of the arrow. The alien artifact and Chaos's artifact clashed, producing an echo resounding through the heavens and earth. The next moment, the world's most brilliant thunder was unleashed. Even the two great artifacts suspended atop Olympus mountain peak could not ignore the might it revealed. Rumble! The divine thunder descended, breaking the chains of order surrounding it. The ancient brass book floated words, but it ultimately is not an artifact purely used for battle. Under Zeus's unreserved full might, the order woven by the codex of creation was pierced by him. The vast thunder finally struck upon the well of reincarnation, stirring a towering frenzy. Clang! The well's body vibrated, life and death's power cycling here, the elements of earth, water, wind, and fire wearing away all things. This world-shattering blow indeed shook the Genesis artifact, but it could not truly harm it. Unless Zeus could completely strip away all of his thunder, then reclaim the power bestowed by. He never imagined that just as he tried to take a shortcut back to the Mount of the Gods, a surge of unbearable memories caused him to be momentarily dazed. And in that momentary misstep, an ever-present spatial vortex suddenly erupted into chaos, whisking him away to an unknown location. Realizing something was wrong, Zeus was furious, but he could not afford to waste time here. Thus, he relied on his connection with Asgard and tore open the space once again. This time, however, he seemed to be too close to one of the forbidden territories outside the world, the mist-laden realm of Niflheim in the spatial domain. Then the power of the evil creatures, bound by the fruit of one day, seemed to sense the original source and fluctuated slightly, forcing Zeus to quickly suppress it. In the end, the fluctuation subsided, and the power of the fruit of one day was quite solid, But unfortunately, Zeus once again lost his way in the chaotic void. While unexpected incidents occurred repeatedly, they seemed to follow a destined script. No one acted against him. Rather, the right things happened at the right time and place, and everything naturally fell into place. With a face as dark as the deepest abyss, he finally emerged from the torn space. No exchange, no harsh words. Zeus knew that at this point, Liana was not going to back down. And the Lord of the Spirit Realm, though not yet appearing, was pouring unrestrained power into those two immensely mighty divine artifacts. So with a gesture, the thunderbolt arrow stolen by Ares appeared in his left hand. With his right hand, he grasped a divine hammer that seemed to condense the infinite light within his palm. His arm swung down, and the hammerhead clashed together with the arrow's tail. The alien realm's artifact collided with Chaos's artifact, issuing a resounding echo across the heavens and earth. In the next moment, the most dazzling thunder in the world was unleashed. Even the two divine artifacts suspended on Mount Olympus's peak could not ignore the might it displayed. Rumble! The divine thunder descended, breaking the chains of order encircling it. The source of this content is novel Fire Net. Ancient texts floated upon the brass book, but it was ultimately not an artifact specialized for battle. Under Zeus's unrestrained full might, the order woven by the Codex of Creation was pierced through. The mighty thunder finally fell upon the well of reincarnation, stirring up a towering storm. Clang! The well's body shook, and the powers of life and death cycled here, while earth, water, wind, and fire eroded all things. This world-shattering strike did indeed shake the Genesis artifact, but could not truly harm it. Unless Zeus could completely strip away all his thunder and reclaim that granted to the abyss, then fuse them all into one, to manifest a symbol uniquely his own. Otherwise, the Genesis artifact could not be damaged by forces beneath it, and Zeus's sovereign authority was not adept at destruction, ruin, corruption, or final death. Spirit Realm. Taking a deep breath, Zeus could see that his actions had meaning, for, in effort to withstand his attack, the well of reincarnation slowed its soul absorption. If he had initially returned here, then he might have found a way to harness Asgard's power, one outside and one inside, to isolate the artifact's soul-devouring. Yes, the ancient gods are masters of spirituality. Even if I block your absorption of these souls, you can extinguish the life force of those untouched by divinity directly from the root, scattering their souls. But once it reaches this point, Zeus could declare that the outer evil god took advantage of his unpreparedness to destroy the Olympian god's kingdom. He wouldn't have violated the contract made with divine persons, but would instead be the completely victimized. Yet now it was different. Asgard had been breached, and interface power was no longer stable. It was powerless to resist even part of a Genesis artifact's soul absorption. And once these souls are taken, reincarnation would be a fortunate outcome. If the lords of the spirit realm transformed these believers' souls into vengeful spirits of soul bodies, harnessing the spirit realm's ubiquitous nature to let them roam the earth, and even reach their former family members, it's almost needless to think. The divine king knew this would devastate Olympus's faith. Phew! With a gesture, Zeus attempted one last effort. He tried to pull on the power of the Hall of Valor to oppose the well of reincarnation's soul absorption. This ancient artifact from the alien realm was exceptionally effective, and Odin spent considerable effort on it. But moments later, Zeus's expression worsened. He suddenly recalled, not long ago, the greatest piece he left within the Hall of Valor. The demigod hero Perseus, who had ascended in flesh, had already lost his physical form. Including him, the remaining so-called heroes could not escape, as those who sided with Perseus, in truth serving as Zeus's anchors to influence the Hall of Valor, were completely destroyed. And it was none other than his son Heracles who destroyed them. It was also none other than the Hall of Valor's former second authority, Nike, the victory goddess Athena granted, who helped him do all this. My daughter, is your shadow also within this? Did you foresee today, guess that I would finally battle the spirit realm, or was it all mere luck, stemming from your king of all victory's divine authority? Zeus did not know, nor did it matter to him. Because the fact was, when he personally gave the Hall of Valor to Athena, the demigods meant to counterbalance her authority all perished, only to return as heroic spirits, instead bound by this artifact. Thus, as long as Athena does not intend to relinquish control, he already had no way to manipulate it. Very well. Very well. One after another, if not useless, then scheming. Father, is this the feeling you once had? With a cold expression, Zeus slowly raised his head. He looked at the shadow of the nether moon afar, and also the souls constantly drawn from Asgard. Forgive me, innocent lambs. Once you were my wealth, but now I must do this. If you want to blame someone, blame those who took you away. Ha, what of the Lord of the Spirit Realm? A soul that's reached my hands. Do you still wish to reclaim it? Don't even think about it. Boom! With a grasp, an intense ripple spread invisibly. In an instant, the well of reincarnation, which was originally absorbing souls, paused slightly, as eerie streaks of blood red began to leak from it. At the same time, all existing souls in Asgard trembled slightly. Some blood-red light burst forth from their spiritual forms, making their expressions become haunting yet perfect. Vaguely, a crystalline leaf passed through the pupils of their eyes, accompanied by cries unheard by mortals. Their soul bodies shattered instantly, exploding into fireworks across the sky. You, Zeus, how dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? Expressionless, a trace of blood slid from the corner of his mouth as a penalty for the divine king breaking the contract with divine persons. Yet breaking a contract with a group of prayers was better than breaking the contract with all creatures. He promised them a paradise-like life after death, and before personally acting, didn't they all achieve it one by one? Both hands rose slightly as if embracing the entire world. At this moment, no longer feigning justice or mercy, Zeus's eyes were cold and indifferent. During these millennia, he built the divine kingdom and absorbed powers from Typhon. The first time he confronted the Lord of Darkness, he was contaminated, while his deities constantly conspired alongside enemies. In such circumstances, would anyone think that he, Zeus, the king of all gods, had really never considered the risk of souls within the divine kingdom, nor thought about harnessing the powers of the ancestor of evil creatures? Since you've already decided, what can I say? Let's go. I imagine that woman Phoebe has already gone ahead. Slightly shaking his head, Aether acknowledged Hemerus' words and then made a choice. As the principal god of the vast star domain, he completely submitted the starry sky he ruled to the divine king, acknowledging his de facto rule over the cosmological laws of the starry sky. In an instant, the invisible order of royal authority spread from the earth, covering 1/5 of the starry sky. At the same time, on the other side of the starry sky, the acknowledgement from another deity quickly followed. Another 1/5 of the star domain recognized the divine king's rule, allowing the invisible net of order to extend further. That was the doing of the goddess of luminous, Phoebe, and her actions did not cease. As the wife of the god of the lightless celestial body, she held limited authority in the wild star domains she occupied, which covered 7/10 of the starry sky, including the land of no light. Although Zeus could stop her if he wished, her authority could not surpass his. Yet, as with every previous occasion, this increasingly profound Titan's god seemed never to intend to express any stance on external affairs, or perhaps he had already made some decision in his heart. In any case, in the absence of any expression from the first authority holder, even though extending the rules of order here was relatively challenging, it still established its power and rule here. The sweeping power of royal authority across the starry sky finally halted at the zodiacal and bi-star domains, but 3 mighty divine powers successively reached the edge of this star domain. Their task was not to break this zodiac barrier sealing the sun. Instead, the divine king only hoped they could trap it here. He was equally prepared for the possibility of the spirit realm's deities releasing the sun, but he wasn't entirely unprepared. Through millennia of research, Zeus had grown increasingly deeply knowledgeable of the power of Typhon derived from the mother tree, or perhaps the mother of flesh had never minded others studying her power. In short, if the spirit realm abandoned the zodiacal star domain, Then he would use Typhon's power to replace the Sun Devourer, using the power of evil creatures to replace the power of the sun. The Zodiac Barrier used the sun's own power to seal itself, so the Divine King would turn the power of evil creatures against itself to suppress it. To a king, all power is open to use, without distinction of good or evil. Yet at this moment, gazing at the zodiacal star domain infused with the essence of the entire starry sky before her, the goddess of luminous, Phoebe, was somewhat eager. "Your Highness Phoebe, what are you planning to do?" NW novel chapters are published on noveifire.net. Ether's eyes twitched, unsure of what madness possessed this woman. The Divine King only asked us to watch this place, never to actually take action. But he didn't forbid us from doing something, did he? Excitement flashed in her eyes as Phoebe glanced at the moon in the bi-star domain. However, a reflection of a red dress flashed there, suddenly sobering the goddess significantly. Though she didn't know why, she instinctively felt a deep connection with the moon. In fact, in certain accounts from later generations, she indeed earned the nickname Ancient Moon Goddess. But since she couldn't target the moon, she shifted her gaze back to the Hall of Valor. "If I reclaim the Hall of Valor for His Majesty and prematurely break the Zodiac Barrier, will he perhaps later grant it to me, allowing me to assist him in subduing the fallen sun in the name of the Goddess of Luminous, or even exercise part of the authority?" "I advise you not to do so." Ether twitched the corner of his mouth and reminded her. Although the power of the Zodiac Barrier is entirely used to deal with the sun, and those spirit realm angels aren't known for their strength, the Hall of Valor is currently Athena's domain. "In short, Phoebe, I urge you to be kind. Humph, if you dare not go, then I'll do it myself." With a cold snort, the goddess of Luminous stepped forward, her expression severe. Previously, in the fight for the title of the most beautiful goddess, she had clashed with Athena and Artemis. Now she found an opportunity. She really didn't believe the other party dared to openly confront the Divine King with violence. Who is it? Show yourself." With a scream, just as Phoebe stepped into the zodiacal star domain, a streak of light tore through the sky and pierced her palm in an instant. Even though the wound healed quickly due to the divine power, the pain inflicted by the injury was very real. Scanning the place where the streak of light fell, and looking at the figure that emerged, Phoebe's face was full of disbelief. She never expected that the one who ambushed her was the manifestation of Athena's companion divine artifact, Victory Goddess Nikki. "Nikki, is it you? You, a weapon not even of intermediate divine power, dare to come here to stand against me?" "I didn't want to come either." Spreading her hands helplessly, Nikki said innocently, "How about we stop fighting and just wait here? Anyway." "Oh, you're such an annoying old woman." The starlight brightened. Ignoring the words of the Victory Goddess, Phoebe directly mobilized her divine power and crushed forward without any fancy moves. Having enjoyed a millennium of faith, as a deity of great divine power, she could not possibly be stopped by such an opponent. Seeing this scene, Nikki had no choice but to quickly retreat while screaming internally, "Athena, Athena, Athena! I'm going to die! I'm going to die! I'm going to die! You sent me here. She's trying to take your stuff. Hurry and come out to beat her to death. You can't abandon your loyal weapon." "But I'm busy now." Without any external ripples, the characters leaped out from the depths of the Victory Goddess's memory, spontaneously forming this line of text. Vaguely, Nikki seemed to see a hint of a smile from it. Seeing this, angry, the Victory Goddess could not help but rebuke loudly. "Help! It's over. The Goddess of Wisdom has abandoned her weapon. Boo-hoo. Someone save me, anyone. Are you going to make a move?" Instantly stopping her fake crying, a smile appeared on her face. At this moment, although no one else noticed the slightest trace, as Athena's most adept weapon, Nikki only felt a familiar hand seemingly holding her being. In an instant, an immense power seemed to be bestowed upon her, as if with a mere movement, an entire star domain would shake. But in response to her inquiry, Athena just displayed another line of text. No, I still have matters to attend to. Now, I'm lending you the strength of one hand. This is enough to handle Phoebe. Gods cannot easily lend powers to each other. But between a deity and her companion divine artifact, they could. The two are essentially one entity in a sense, just like only when holding the arrow of thunder is Zeus the complete thunder god. Only when holding Thor's spear is Athena truly the king of all victories. Yet, feeling this reassuring power, Nikki still tried to refuse this unreasonable request. Don't do this, Athena. I'm just a weapon. All right, truly an irresponsible master. Silently making a jab, the victory goddess looked at Phoebe rushing towards her. The mental exchange seemed long, while in reality, it wasn't even a breath's time. Holding herself while saying she didn't want to fight at this moment, Nikki only felt excitement. Does anyone really think a divine artifact representing victory doesn't want to battle? Come on, old woman. Today I just want to beat you to death, or be beaten to death by you. Wielding her long spear, the victory goddess shouted words she couldn't remember where she heard them, laughing as she charged at Phoebe. Standing in the distance, Aether and Hemera did nothing but silently watched all of this unfold. As two seasoned homebuddies, they only wanted to stay on the sidelines, not intending to get involved in these divine conflicts. So what if they stood with the winning side? Would it let them become great divine powers? If not, then let it be. They were not like Phoebe, driven mad at the brink of the starry sky. Whether in the underworld before or now amidst the stars, their days were quite good, having no need to court disaster. Within the underworld, the god of west wind, Zephyrus, walked into the palace of Hades, looking at the couple seated on the throne. Queen of the underworld Persephone, once a weak seed goddess. But now, from her presence, Zephyrus only felt a grand majesty. Has the queen of the underworld, sharing Hades' authority, grown stronger herself? The god of west wind did not know, but he was only here to deliver the divine king's command. Prince Zephyrus, is Zeus planning to defy the pact once made with us brothers? On the throne, with a gaze deepening, Hades casually questioned the divine king's envoy in front of him. Not at all, your majesty. Bowing slightly, the god of west wind displayed what seemed to be great politeness. Yet, his next words tore apart the facade of warmth. His Majesty the Divine King is the guardian of vows. How could he break the agreement once made with you and the Sea Emperor together? But you also know, not long ago, a being from the abyss, the sinful ancient serpent, brutally attacked the esteemed Lord Poseidon. And to this day, there's no trace of the adversary. For this, the Divine King has been restless day and night, worried about you as the only brother he has left in the mortal realm. Just not long ago, he unexpectedly learned another shocking piece of news. A more powerful abyssal entity seems to have set its sights on you, trying to abduct you when your majesty is unprepared. And she is watching you now. His expression changed drastically, and at this moment, Hades truly felt a gaze coming from the abyss. Even though the other party had not stepped out of Tartarus, even though she concealed her existence. But that power, which surpassed even a true god, was extremely clear, making the king of the underworld unable to ignore it. You! Not believing in a random discovery, Hades was more willing to believe that it was trouble deliberately brought to him by Zeus. However, under someone else's roof, he had to bow his head. Resisting the rage, the king of the underworld asked word by word. So, I wonder how the honorable divine King Majesty plans to solve this problem. Make me dissolve the divine court of the underworld, and go to Mount Olympus to serve him? No. Shaking his head slightly, Zephyrus slowly spoke. As long as you acknowledge His Majesty's order and recognize the dignity of his sovereignty, that's enough. His face grim, silent for a long time, until he felt the tremors from the earth, the movement when the divine king struck the well of reincarnation with thunder. He coldly glanced at Zephyrus. Get out. No matter, you just contemplate it yourself. Turning away, the god of west wind didn't think Hades would refuse. because just now even he felt that terrifying killing intent coming from the abyss. He did not know that the owner of this power actually couldn't manifest such might outside of Tartarus, but neither did Hades. Showing a trace of dread, the king of the underworld was somewhat in a dilemma. He could choose to refuse, the price might be facing an enemy like the great serpent from last time. He could also choose to accept. After all, acknowledging order does not mean completely submitting to Zeus. Athens technically also falls under the umbrella of royal order, but this does not prevent them from resisting the attacks of all countries. But he knew this was the beginning. Once there was a first step, there would be a second. Hades, do you still remember your dream? In the deathly silent great hall, suddenly, Persephone spoke. I remember. Then do you still remember your subsequent plans for it? I remember. Hades, do you remember what you once said to me? I remember. Taking a deep breath, the king of the underworld's gaze swept over the abyss. Is it a demon, no matter who you are? I have remembered you. Deities are undying, divine authority eternal. Perhaps it won't be long before you regret this. Buzz, no longer resisting, the order of the divine king probed into the underworld. Vaguely, the entire underworld not only did not weaken because of this but even became stronger. The order of sovereignty is not a bad thing. It binds everything more closely, more concretely, more vibrant, and more united under the present order. Whether the underworld or the depths of the stars, even the edge of the ocean, these parts originally existed in the cracks between worlds. But when the divine king's power extended over, they submitted more to the rules of order. On the nameless peak, although she did not witness it firsthand, Clotho slightly opened her mouth, as if discovering something very surprising. Oh, Mr. Great Demon King, your method is really useful. It seems like fate has been partially repaired again. I can feel the order of the present world developing towards a more stable direction. If things continue like this, it seems like it can become more powerful. Is this not what the divine king should do? Trying to sense the original trajectory of fate, although it has already been altered too much, Clotho still saw a bit at this moment. Yes, the divine king is on the right path. He should entirely rule the heavens and earth and oceans, acting on the powers of the present world. A single golden rope could pull up all deities, along with the earth and boundless mountains and rivers, beside Clotho also without witnessing firsthand. Listening to the fates lament, a hint of solemnity flashed in Lane's eyes. Yes, this is the real threat of Zeus, the heavenly destiny, shrouded over him that has not faded, and also the reason why he did not stop Liana from taking action against Asgard. Because regardless of taking action or not, the divine king would do all this today, and Ares was merely a pawn he discarded. So he let many angels stay in the spirit realm, abandoning those believers he never cared about, allowing Zeus to be satisfied with the spirit realm's concession after testing, completely unifying the earth, ocean, underworld, and stars, just waiting for the divine self to return, to use the all-ending black sword to crush everything. Is this a choice I can accept? Of course not. If the present world order and destiny collapse, there will be no divine king in the fourth epoch. Then conversely, the divine king and the present world are so tightly connected. If Zeus is allowed to accomplish all this, it would mean he personally consolidated the scattered power of the present world into one rope, organized under the supreme rule. This colossal endeavor might truly change the replacement of the divine king, causing one theoretical fourth-generation divine king after another to appear in legend, yet none could truly replace him, and I would also face a stronger present world. Why should I accept such a result? From the world's perspective, perhaps what Zeus is doing is right. But from another perspective, Lane found this utterly foolish. He had told Clotho that he would save the world, and save the world again. Though not all three worlds referred to chaos, there was indeed one of them. In the depths of his mind, Lane spoke to himself. Mortal realm, Olympus. It seemed as though a long time had passed, yet it happened almost simultaneously. Starlight became dazzling, the underworld trembled. Supreme sovereign power unfolded, enhancing itself as well as marking the achievements of the divine king in the present world. Thus, the backlash from violating the covenant with the divine was only just becoming apparent. when a force far surpassing the original suddenly descended. This was just the beginning, because the unification and organization of the royal order in a new domain cannot be accomplished overnight. All gods seemed to obey, yet their divergent thoughts also delayed its completion. Nonetheless, Zeus knew that as long as there was enough time, this step would be achieved by him sooner or later. And before that happens, he could perhaps do even more. The mortal realm, it is time to unify. He waited for several breaths, both to adapt to the stronger power of royal authority and to await the response from the Lord of the spirit realm. But Zeus felt neither joy nor disappointment, as he perpetually sensed no will emanating from deep within the spirit realm. With a slight shake of his head, Zeus did not know whether it was absence or slumber. Both were possible, but the divine king need not delve deeply. He simply stepped forward, confronting the rules descending from the codex of creation, arriving at the ancient well which emitted strands of strange blood color. Genesis artifact, I met you for the first time when I entered the spirit realm. Since you are a divine artifact that attracts souls, why did you come to the mortal realm? Boom! A great hand pressed down, gripping the sides of the ancient well. An unimaginably immense power attempted to drag it out of the seams of space-time, to suppress it within the now empty Asgard. A giant visage stood like a giant god, grinning widely, as Zeus sensed the energy of corruption and erosion within the well of reincarnation. Normally, souls flowing into the spirit realm along the waters of the river of oblivion would not, even if carrying corruptive power, ever contact the reincarnation core. It would settle in the river of oblivion, to be stripped away in the hands of three goddesses, always returning to its purest origin. However, once it left the central axis of the spirit realm, it allowed an opportunity for outside interference. Rush! The well water boiled. Blood-red color began to seize the territory of black and white. An unexpected color flashed in his eyes. Zeus did not expect this effect to be so pronounced. Was it because the essence of the power of evil creatures was fundamentally tied to life and death? He wasn't very sure, but such a result was always good. Watching the blood-red change from a point into an expanse, and then from an expanse into a vortex. The divine king leaned closer, peering deep into the ancient well. According to old legend, secrets of the spirit realm were hidden at the well bottom of the well of reincarnation. Some say it is a divine artifact, a pair of golden and lead double arrows capable of distorting thought. Some say it is a plant, a heaven and earth spirit root akin to the golden apple tree. Others say it is a prison in truth, in the interweaving of life and death. Terrifying things that even the Lord of the spirit realm feared were imprisoned there. Regarding the answer to this question, Zeus was also very curious, so now he personally sought verification. Come, let me see. What exactly is inside here? Raya. Invisible force parted the water surface. The center of the blood-red vortex seemed directly to reach the bottom. The divine king bent down, looking into the pitch-black well bottom. There, the gaze across worlds was completed. Did His Majesty win? On Mount Olympus, her lower body had already transformed into a fishtail. Aphrodite swam through the molten lava river, constantly ready to escape. Who knows? Winning or losing, what worry do you have either way? Speaking indifferently, disregarding the goddess of beauty's appearance. Since sculpting a statue in the likeness of Aphrodite, Hephaestus seemed to lose interest in the real person. At this moment, he simply held a heavy forge hammer, gazing distantly at the sky beyond the mountain. There, the nether moon hung high, seasons turned. The divine king leaned into the well of reincarnation. Behind him was the codex of creation pressing forward. Any of those there could crush his power in battle, yet fortunately Hephaestus had no intention to partake. Why? Unlike the relaxed god of craftsmanship, Aphrodite could not summon such a mood. Have you not witnessed the chaos of Typhon, if I had stayed on the Mount of the Gods at that time? Are you crazy? Utterly speechless, Hephaestus shook his head. That is the spirit realm, although those subgods of the Lord of the spirit realm were a bit paranoid. It's not as if they couldn't communicate. I forge iron. You only dance. Are you intending to lend a hand to the divine king? Indeed, this is life that can speak and think. Although possessing perfect appearances, they lack matching minds. Wouldn't it be better if there were no hearts? Various thoughts flashed through his mind, but fearing that they could affect his temple, destroy his arts and creations, Hephaestus couldn't care less about the outside. Even if the divine kingdom ceased to exist, how would that matter? His most esteemed assistants and believers had long accompanied him in another form. At a loss for words, Aphrodite couldn't find suitable reasons to argue back. But thinking carefully about Hephaestus's words, she found them somewhat reasonable. Indeed, she too had a backup plan now, so even if something went wrong, she wouldn't be entirely without escape. Her attitude relaxed slightly. Yet observing the situation in the sky, the goddess of beauty frowned. What is the divine king watching? Why is he so slow to move? Puzzling, but perhaps this is the nature of the interaction between great divine powers. The thought flashed through her mind. Aphrodite pondered thus. Yet the thought did not last long. Beyond the mountain of the gods, the originally stagnant situation changed once again. At some unknown point, the water of the well of reincarnation returned to its original two colors. A pale golden net transformed into chains, binding the divine king's body from behind. Yet the divine king did not resist at all. Olympus before the golden palace. The well of reincarnation inverted in the sky, the codex of creation sealing the realms. The shadow of Asgard loomed indistinctly, and for the first time, the remnants of the 9 realms, once ruled by Zeus, were exposed so directly to all beings. The deities and nymphs on the Mount of the Gods looked at each other, incredulous that the divine king, who had just displayed great power, had suddenly fallen into the divine realm he had once created. But this was not the main issue. The greater problem was that the divine artifact from the spirit realm and the power it brought were restrained, but the deities themselves were not. With the shadow of the nether moon on her back, wings unfolded behind her. Vast divine power surged above the Mount of the Gods, making it impossible for those with anything less than intermediate divine power to even gaze upon it. Liana knew that, in principle, her task for today was completed. With Zeus trapped here, he could no longer expand the scope of his sovereign power in the short term. The core of the starry sky, the edge of the earth, Hades' passive resistance. These issues were already enough to delay him as long as he didn't personally intervene. Yet just walking away left Liana somewhat unsatisfied. These present-day gods had been comfortable for too long, with flourishing life forms giving them more adoration than in any previous era. Innumerable mortals racked their brains to curry the favor of the gods, just to praise the glory of the gods. So much so that figures like Ares were emerging in droves, having forgotten what it means to show reverence. Her gaze shifted, and Liana looked towards the deities on the Mount of the Gods. There was more than one powerful divine force remaining here, but if she called in a few more people, even if they joined forces to resist. She slightly raised her eyes, frowned slightly, and reached out toward the distance. In that direction, a faint aura resonating with Zeus's power of royal authority was rapidly approaching, heading straight for her. Surrounded by lightning with a glow accompanying. Looking at the chaos of Olympus, Hera couldn't hide her fury, even though she didn't yet understand what had happened. Hebe had just been harmed, and in her rage she went to handle the matter, only for such a change to occur in Olympus, making it impossible for her not to take notice. Stop! With a stern shout, Hera invoked the power of the heavenly empress. An invisible ripple swept across, merging with the thunder around her, crashing onto the shadow of the nether moon. Buzz. Silver and purple intertwined lines spread through the void, tearing through the 9 clouds above and below the Mount of the Gods. Retracting her right hand, despite not being at a disadvantage. Yet vaguely, Liana still felt a hint of pain. Facing the gods, without the divine king's permission, Hera could not suppress them with the power of the heavenly empress. But against the enemies of the Olympian pantheon, this position granted her power second only to that of Zeus. But this was not enough. As an interim overseer of the spirit realm, Liana had far more resources to mobilize. However, at this moment, her pupils suddenly contracted. Beside Hera, a figure that should have been sealed slowly appeared. This is a bluff. After a brief hesitation, Liana immediately discerned the truth. The true form of Zeus had indeed been sealed in Asgard. What was appearing here now was his previously shattered incarnation. After all, before the Divine King's true form arrived, there was already an avatar of him on Mount Olympus. Though unable to resist the power of the Genesis artifact, with the blessings of Asgard and the Divine Court, he might possess strength far beyond that of a true god on Mount Olympus. But now Asgard has been sealed, along with most of Zeus's power being imprisoned. Even though this incarnation can still exist, it no longer possesses that invincible strength. However, weakened as it is, Liana understood that with him here, she probably couldn't harm these deities of the present world anymore. Your Majesty, have you come forth? Divine King. Not only Liana, but all the gods on the Mount of the Gods noticed Zeus's presence. Calls echoed one after another, as if confidence was gathering alongside them. Enough! With a calm expression, the Divine King slightly raised his hand, signaling all gods to quiet down for the time being. Looking up at the shadow of the nether moon, Zeus didn't strike. Because he knew that with just an incarnation lacking the support of power, it would be very difficult to suppress the opponent. This is just the beginning, spirit realm deities. But this will not be the end. Since you have chosen to take this step first, I will not relent either. Speaking indifferently, Zeus's avatar raised the scepter, issuing orders in the name of the Divine King. From today, we are enemies on opposing sides. Enemies? Facing the Divine King's gaze, Liana said coldly. We have been for a long time. Deep within the spirit realm, a stone slab missing a corner lightly shook, casting its power toward the mortal realm. Even though the reflection holding the stone slab knew they couldn't win, Liana still intended to try. Zeus wanted to unify the present world, but interfaces beyond the present world did not wish for his success, a conflict existing long ago. As for today, it was merely the point of eruption. Starry sky. Standing at the edge of the zodiacal star domain, Aether's divine power surged. A variety of dazzling, unpredictable auroras circled around him, illuminating the dark, lifeless starry sky. At first glance, it seemed as though this ancient deity was finally unable to resist making a move to participate in the distant battle, a one-sided battering. But in reality, the god of Heavenly Father had been posing for a long time. And from beginning to end, he never intended to make a move. You know. With a somewhat strange expression, Aether said to his goddess of daylight. Although I've never really thought much of Phoebe, even the entire faction of Heavenly Father and Earth Mother Titans seems a bit too warlike in my eyes. But just now, I truly wondered if she might have some powerful hidden cards, wielding some weapon unknown to all, or perhaps some other ability to help her seize the Hall of Valor. Yet, I couldn't have expected that she not only lacked these preparations but even had such limited fighting skills. I recall during the Second Era, didn't she fight against the couple Hyperion? Isn't there too much of a difference? Perhaps. Silent and speechless, Hemera strode through the starry sky, creating her own world. The scene of daylight morphed unpredictably, dispelling the cold and desolation of the entire starry sky. Though I want to say, over tens of thousands of years have passed since then, it's normal for her to have forgotten how to fight. But what you say is true. Even so, her performance still exceeded the lowest bounds of my estimation. A divine spirit of formidable power, even borrowing the power of faith, her divine power was solid. In the end, in the clash of real weapons, she was struck by another deity's weapon. Yes, of course, both could see, saying it was a beat, but in fact, Phoebe, the goddess of Luminous, wasn't really harmed. Despite occasionally suffering minor injuries, panicked and flustered, she loudly called for their aid, constantly threatening her enemies with words. But seeing her current situation, even if this beating continued for a year, it wouldn't really harm her. After all, as her opponent, Nikki also for the first time controlled such powerful force alone. Even though the godhood of victory allowed her to constantly accumulate experience, often making unexpected moves, the idea of her being able to impact Phoebe was purely wishful thinking. I've tried to advise her, but she wouldn't listen. Not listening isn't a problem. It would be fine when the Divine King arrived. But looking at it now, it's unlikely Zeus will come. With a shrug, Aether then seemed a bit puzzled. Because in his senses, although the Divine King was trapped in Asgard, his power of royal authority hadn't halted the assimilation and alignment of the new star domain, just slowed down a bit. Judging by this situation, the Divine King still has a connection with the outside world. So why wouldn't he emerge? Perhaps it's because of those legends. Understanding the god of Heavenly Father's confusion, Hemera couldn't help but joke. Isn't there a legend saying that the bottom of the well of reincarnation hides the secrets of the spirit realm? Perhaps that prison is real, housing something terrifying, entangling the Divine King so he can't break through. Either way, these matters have little to do with us. We simply need to stay here. Nodding in agreement with Hemera's words, Aether thought similarly they simply needed to stay here. Turning to glance at the depths of the vast, profound starry sky, the god of Heavenly Father showed a friendly smile. Receiving no response, yet he was unbothered. Zeus, had he come for his wife's sake? Logically it seemed plausible, but following a gut feeling, Aether felt it might not be so simple. The power of Chaos World's dark side was stronger than the light side, benefiting this god of lightless celestial body, who unknowingly stepped to the pinnacle of true gods. But even with such strength, he always kept a low profile. From this perspective, he must either have no contention with the world, disinclined to attract trouble, or perhaps he sees through the situation, knowing that there is no opportunity for him now, and only patience is true. If it's the former, it's fine, but if it's the latter, then Phoebe's repeated actions might have already touched his bottom line. No matter how low-key Zeus is, he cannot change the fact that he and Phoebe are husband and wife. Others see the goddess of Luminous. Their first thought would naturally be of him. This is the inevitable result, an unavoidable reality. So to resolve this issue, what will you do? Slightly shaking his head, Aether did not continue pondering. If Chaos still holds any chance of ascending greatness, the god of Heavenly Father's chance is essentially zero. Without hope, there is no disappointment. So sitting steadily and watching Phoebe devoid of any ability to fight back, Aether wanted to see how long this Titan god would take to realize that no one would help her. Mortal realm southeast of the earth, in front of a passage leading to the underworld. With a pale face, weak breath, like an old man on the brink of death, or a patient suffering from a terminal illness. On the bronze chariot, Ares' expression was bleak, his eyes revealing a touch of uncontrollable fear. Not long before, thinking he had Zeus's support and favor, he had just wielded the thunderbolt arrow, attempting to fulfill the task the Divine King had entrusted to him. Unexpectedly, in a place where he had once suffered humiliation and deceit from mortals, suddenly Zeus's power erupted, forcibly tearing the void as he went. And shortly after, the divine artifact in his grasp vanished into the sky, going to chase its true master. In a moment, with the artifact lost, the army had suffered over half their casualties. Though the elite troops remained intact, relying on them to break through Silver Moon City was simply a pipe dream. At that moment, Ares was somewhat at a loss, though he did not despair. As he saw it, Zeus still supported him, having just promised to shield him from the suppression of the present world's laws. Who? Panic-stricken, with a touch of ferocity like a beast facing danger, Ares gripped the bronze dagger he had somehow acquired, nervously watching the front. He was too weak now, so weak that any demigod from the mortal realm might be able to stop him. If there was a wizard blocking his path now, or those ascetics from Silver Moon City who hadn't made a move from the beginning, he would probably fall here. After all, Ares had heard of these terrifying humans, selected from the Spirit Realm Church's elite guards and priests, who voluntarily sharpened their spirits through the harshest lifestyles, ultimately bearing that power with strong will the fragments of the ancient sun god scattered in the mortal realm. According to them, this was to bear and redeem the sin of the fake god, using their spirit to affect the will within those fragments. If one day, that old sun could realize his mistakes, perhaps he would be wholly forgiven by the Master, able to walk once more upon the earth. Ares scoffed at this, but it wasn't as if he feared their power, because depending on the size and level of the fragments they bore, these ascetics gave themselves different names. From those not qualified to bear the name of ascetic, like sentry, night patrol, sun dancer, to those truly starting to temper their will, such as light sacrifice, master, and even those who could draw demigod strength from divine fragments and incomplete authority, such as light sun, inspector. Undoubtedly, if the war god were to encounter a light sun here who could briefly transform into the proud sun, he would only have to wait helplessly to be dragged into the endless abyss. 3-21. Huff, 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 huff. The heavy panting, tense spirit, yet before the bronze chariot, there was no red-robed, barefoot ascetic, no legendary wizard with powerful soul. Ares saw only a girl in a white dress covering her head that had been knocked, glaring at him. She seemed not to pose any threat, seemed to be just an ordinary girl. But at this moment, the war god's scarce wisdom began to function. Having lost great power, his insight became much finer. On the girl's body, he did not see anything that could be considered an injury. "Who are you? Get out of the way or die!" With the bronze dagger pointing forward, he shouted threateningly. Among the three fates, Clotho was the only one who hadn't emerged, so Ares did not recognize her. He only knew he mustn't let her see his bluff but show his strength. "You! How can you be so rude?" Her mouth slightly open, pointing at Ares on the chariot. She was the one who had been hit, yet the other party was blaming the victim, which made Clotho even angrier. "I clearly told you to stop just now. It was you who bumped into me. You should apologize. But don't worry, as long as you apologize, I will forgive you." With a serious expression, Clotho knew that crashing into the Fates' carriage was definitely not a mere accident. It would bring some kind of omen, especially as Ares was driving the chariot at the moment, which perhaps portends him heading towards a fork in fate, a completely different turning point. But in her expression, Ares clearly did not appreciate Clotho's kindness. His face grew increasingly grim, looking at the goddess in the white dress. The war god just felt she was deliberately making trouble. "We did not know each other previously." Suppressing his anger, Ares shouted loudly. "So there's no need for me to heed you, especially since I didn't hear your shout. Now, get out of the way. This is my final warning." "No, you can't go through." Her face slightly changing upon hearing, Clotho's voice became significantly more anxious. You have too many vengeful spirits on you, you should release them. They shouldn't enter the abyss with you, that's wrong." At dusk, to others, Ares appeared alone. But in Clotho's eyes, there was a boundless tide of souls around him. To resist the law's punishment, to delay entering the abyss, thereby giving himself a chance to find a way out. Ares had linked his army with war, whether living or dead. He also linked his godhood practitioner, the devout believers he could sense, and anything that could be listed as subordinates by him at that time, then united the army to shoulder this punishment together. Of course, law cannot be deceived so easily, and this does not exempt the war god from penalty. But it is not without use, so the punishment was postponed, at the cost that they would enter the abyss with Ares. It was sensing this act so clearly counter to fate happening before her eyes that brought Clotho here hurriedly, trying to stop Ares's actions. After all, she can only try to obstruct this. "Who?" Panic-stricken, with a touch of ferocity like a beast facing danger, Ares gripped the bronze dagger he had somehow acquired, nervously watching the front. He was too weak now, so weak that any demigod from the mortal realm might be able to stop him. If there was a wizard blocking his path now, or those ascetics from Silver Moon City who hadn't made a move from the beginning, he would probably fall here. After all, Ares had heard of those terrifying humans, selected from the spirit realm church's most elite guards and priests, who voluntarily tempered their spirits with the harshest life, ultimately using their formidable will to bear that power, fragments of the ancient sun god scattered in the mortal realm. According to them, this was bearing the sins of the fake god, using their spirit to purify the will within those fragments. If one day, that ancient sun could awaken to its own mistakes, perhaps it would be forgiven by the Supreme Lord and allowed to walk upon the earth once more. Ares sneered at this, yet it wasn't because he feared the other's power. Because according to the size and level of the fragments they bore, these ascetics gave themselves different names. From those unqualified to bear the names Sentry, Night Patrol, Sun Dancer, to those truly honing their will like Light Sacrifice, Master, even to those able to extract demigod powers from the divine fragments, sipping incomplete authority, the Light Sun and Inspector. Without a doubt, if the war god were to encounter a light sun capable of temporarily becoming a proud sun, he might only await his own demise, being dragged into the endless abyss. 3-21. Hoo-ha! Hoo-ha! Heavy breathing, strained spirit, yet no barefoot ascetic draped in rough cloth. No soul-strong legendary wizard stood before the bronze chariot. Ares only saw a girl in a white dress clutching her bumped forehead, glaring at him with wide eyes. She seemed to pose no threat, appearing merely as an ordinary girl. But at this moment, the war god's rare wisdom began to surface. As he lost his profound strength, his insight sharpened. On the girl, he saw no trace of what could be termed an injury. Who are you? Move or die. The bronze spear pointed forward, issued a loud threat. Among the three fates, Clotho was the only one never manifested, so Ares did not recognize her. He only knew he mustn't let her see through his bluff but needed to show his power instead. You! How rude you are! Slightly opening her mouth, she pointed at Ares on the chariot. She was the one who got hit, yet the other party blamed her, which made Clotho even angrier. I clearly told you to stop just now. You ran straight into me, you should apologize to me. But don't worry, as long as you apologize, I will forgive you. Looking serious, Clotho knew that crashing into the fate goddess's vehicle was no ordinary accident. It would bring some sort of omen in the unseen. Especially since Ares was currently driving the chariot, this could signify he was heading towards a fate's junction. A distinctly different pivot. But in her demeanor, Ares clearly didn't grasp Clotho's good intentions. His expression grew more savage, staring at the goddess in a white dress. The war god merely felt she was intentionally finding fault. We weren't previously acquainted. Suppressing his anger, Ares shouted loudly. So I have no obligation to heed you, let alone I didn't hear you shout. Now, clear the way. This is my final warning. No, you cannot proceed. Hearing this made her face change slightly. Clotho's voice became evidently anxious. You have way too many grievances. You should release them quickly. They shouldn't accompany you into the abyss. It's wrong. At this hour of dusk, in others' eyes, Ares was alone. But in Clotho's view, beside him was an overwhelming, boundless tide of souls. In order to delay his entry into the abyss, giving himself a chance for a way out, Ares linked his army through war, whether alive or deceased. He also linked his godhood practitioners, the devoted followers he could sense, and everything he could consider under his command at that time, embodying the army as one, so everyone bore this law's punishment together. Naturally, the law wasn't so easily deceived. This didn't exempt the war god from punishment. But it wasn't useless either, so the punishment was postponed, the cost being they would be drawn into the abyss with Ares. Perceiving this act clearly defying fate occurring in front of her, Clotho hurried here to stop Ares's actions. After all, she could only block beings of such level. But before her, the war god evidently couldn't comprehend her good intentions. You actually know about my punishment by Father God. Know that I must enter the abyss? His already tense mood became further aggravated. The war god felt this woman had premeditated everything. But just when he was about to fight to the death, another voice timely emanated from the side. Ahem, no rush. Lightly coughing, Lane said with a smile. Miss Torlock, aren't you the witch who worships the fate goddess in the northern lands? Why not quickly explain to the war god his highness? You foresaw a glimpse of fate, specifically to aid him henceforth. Ah, uttered simultaneously, the intense momentum was disrupted. Ares took a glance at Lane stepping out from the forest. A trace of apprehension flashed in his eyes. Another unknown figure emerged. Before this, he hadn't even sensed his aura. He was truly too weak in his current state. Turning his gaze back to Clotho, the war god asked skeptically, "Are you a believer of the fate goddess, capable of foreseeing the future?" "Ah, yes, but he can also foresee the future." Looking somewhat bewildered, Clotho immediately pointed at Lane beside her. "He knows why I'm here, but if it's anything bad, I will refuse it, okay?" The last sentence directed at Lane, considering the previously successful reversal of the Divine King's fate. Clotho decided to trust the evil Great Demon King once more. Watching all this, Ares once again felt as if he was being toyed with. "Both of you can foresee the future? Fine. Let's say you can. Then tell me, how can I change my punishment of entering the abyss?" "That's unchangeable." Stepping forward, pleased with Clotho's compliance, Lane simultaneously pronounced the war god's death sentence, offering another solution as Ares was about to erupt. "The law's punishment isn't impossible to counteract, but no one will help you. So instead of thinking about how to avoid punishment, how about a different approach, for example, how to get out?" "How to get out?" "Yes." Nodding, Lane asked in return, "Respected war god, you're thrown into the abyss by the Divine King. But did the Divine King specify when you must leave?" "It seems no." Deep in thought, Ares felt he began to understand something. Indeed, there's no such specification, which means unlike Titans once imprisoned in the abyss, you can leave as long as the law's punishment on you returns to null. Speaking calmly, Lane then brought up another matter. "Speaking of which, Your Highness Ares, do you remember Achilles? You may not know, but he's actually still alive, just living in the abyss. And that's why we found you today. The ultimate fate reveals it all. The war god among humans and the war god among all gods. Only one of you can survive. So you understand my point." "I understand." A hint of excitement flashed across his pale face. Ares slowly said, "Only one of the two can live, but as a deity, I am undying, so the one to die must be him.